My presentation today is called A Pursuit of Perspection, Pursuit of Perfection. Say that 5 times fast. A Perspective Application by Haniff Morris. I had a alternative presentation that I want to get done, but it was getting too big. It was way too big and too intricate and had too many moving parts. So I decided to do this one, which is a little bit more short and compact for the hour time frame. I know it's Sunday afternoon and brothers got stuff to do, so I appreciate you all sharing your time with us all. Moving forward, my outline, I just want to let you know that, we actually have an outline. We actually have a course that we're trying to trod. I'm not just freestyling here, just something that we want to get done in a concise and organized fashion. The first thing we're going to talk about is the crux. The crux is basically the core of our presentation today, what we're actually trying to get done and what it actually is the subject and meat of the matter. We get distracted a lot of times by costumes and music and, politics and stuff within masonry, but we just want to keep the main thing the main thing. The next thing is infinity, looking at the potential of us in relation, us with each other and us with God. Whenever we think that something's big, it's always much more bigger. Progress, we look at how we elevate each other. Masonry itself is supposed to be a progressive science. So whenever we have information, we should be able to move on from different levels from one to the other, moving up continuously to make our scope broader and wider and more applications. Perception, we look at the reflection of us within God's image, and being a reflection of God's image, what is the potential use of that particular image itself? Archetypes, we talk about the plum and how it's set upon a wall, and Amos said this, that, and the third, and how that particular passage means. But we want to look at some of the archetypes that came before us and how we can use their example as our blueprint for our lives. And in conclusion, anytime I give a presentation, I want to make sure that I give you something that you can hold on to, something that you can actually take on tomorrow and the next day and the next day. I don't want to be a bunch of words and rituals and abstracts and, space and quasars, but I want to have something that you can actually use productively. With that being said, we'll move on to the next screen, which is the crux. The crux of Freemasonry lies within the sincere labor reflecting upon its symbols, emblems, lectures, history, laws, rites, rituals, etc. As with any valuable revelation, the truths that lead to knowledge, wisdom, and understanding will remain veiled without appropriate preparation, perspiration, and perspective. So what am I saying? I'm saying that even though that you might have this information in front of you, everybody got the same blue book, but how you use it and how you implement it is a totally different ballgame. So if you're not willing to actually prepare yourself, meaning your mind, your body, and your spirit to receive the information, then it's a moot point. Perspiration means that you're actually going to do the work. You're going to sit down at your kitchen table. You're going to have this reference manual. You're going to have your books. You're going to have your ritual. You're going to have all of these things at your disposal and try to come up with the information in a way that you can actually understand it. And perspective. The final thing is, even though you might have this information, you have to put it in its proper perspectives. Because if you don't, then you don't actually have the use of those particular working tools. You can't use a saw to drive in a screw. I mean, you could, but it'll be kind of wrong. So you want to use the tools in the ways that you probably are meant for them to be used for. Going on, it says, however, by the grace of the grand architect of the universe and the assistance of learned brethren, a neophyte receives more light via reception, mastery, and application of the tools placed in his hands. Once again, we talk about actually receiving information that you actually been presented, mastering those particular things. And I want to pause at the mastery part. When you're playing, say, for instance, basketball, the first thing that you probably learn is how to make a layup. You're closest to the basket, and actually it's just 2 points that you can actually guarantee. So you dribble down with your right hand, you make the right-handed layup. And then when you get a little frisky, you go down with the left hand, you make the left-hand layup. And then you start to work on those particular skills until you master making a layup. Think of Kyrie Irving. If you guys watch basketball, he's a master of making layups. So he can take his right hand, come under the basket and use some English and go on the left side and use it. But you're actually mastering the particular use of that particular skill. Now, mind you, it's still a layup, but how he actually mastered it is actually appropriate. So if you compare that to masonry, using the foundational tools that you're presented and using them in a way can be very, very devastating. And of course, application of the tools that was placed in our hands does it make sense for us to have all this knowledge and then available for us to apply those within our daily lives? Moving on, although one brother cannot travel the path for another by sharing insight with those of similar aspirations, rocky terrains can be made smoother and bridges can span chasms. So just like this group, if we're actually going to be able to work together and move together, we have to be able to share each other's knowledge and move on from one hand to the other, because you can't walk the road by yourself. You actually have to go with other people. Infinity. It is widely accepted that humans only utilize 10% of their mental prowess. The remaining 90% of potential still pales in comparison to deity. Students of the ancient mystery systems appreciate the intellectual conception of spirit is only a proportional reflection of an individual's capacity and is not the whole of the spirit itself. So just because me and my failed brain can only interpret small points of the information that we're getting, small points of the spirit that we're getting, doesn't mean that that's all there is. There's still always more out there. We talk about infinity. What's the biggest number? We say it's infinity, but if infinity plus one is bigger than infinity, infinity times infinity is still infinity. Infinity times infinity plus one is still bigger number. So there's always something bigger and better out there. As a Mason becomes more familiar with the abstracts of infinity, infinite time, space, and spirit, the entire fullness thereof remains outside of comprehension without God's intervention to change the condition of one's whole being and thus increase capacity to receive additional light. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that even though you might have the IQ of a genius, you might have a 200 IQ, if there's not a spiritual intervention by God himself to actually inform you of how to use that information, how to produce that information, how to master information, then you're kind of missing the whole entire picture. You need both. You need the square and the compass. Progress. By faith, man climbs a winding staircase, hoping to arrive at progressively higher elevations of vibrations. Therefore, with attempts to dogmatize spiritual principle within the limitations of one's own understanding, one often begins to segregate a universal infinity and relegate any exterior precept as error. So I'm saying that even though that you become, the pastor of your church, you become the bishop of your region, you become whatever it is that you become of, just because you take those higher steps doesn't mean that whatever somebody else does, it makes it wrong. You understand what I'm saying? So if you see a beggar on the street, doesn't mean that the information that you can get from makes it wrong, and make sure that you're always right depending on your station. It's always something that you can learn no matter where the information comes from. Freemasonry reminds that however grand one's personal doctrine may seem, it is doubtless not without stain. In fact, a brother learns to focus on the unsullied spiritual fabric that binds mankind together instead of the self-manufactured differences that tear us apart. So what am I saying is that even though that, you might have this affinity towards your particular religion, your particular doctrine, there's always going to be a stain on it. There's always going to be something that you might not find that jives with your particular personality at that particular point. There's always something else that you can learn. There's always progress to be made. Perception versus reflection. Man's image of his creator is limited to personal capacity. So whatever your capacity is to actually ingest the deity, the God himself, is limited to your particular comprehensive grasp. Even though that you might feel that you're all knowing, all seeing, you're not. God is. So without the actual ability to limit your particular perception, then you can't understand the scope of God itself. It goes back to the word infinity again. In dealings with deity, there ought not to be a capitulation to baser diversions. Instead, implement a subdued passion and reflect the image of immutable potency, consciousness, presence, and benevolence. If man is created in a reflected image of God, then one should ever strive to assume such a reflection in deed and in truth. We talk about people who join church or mosque or temple or whatever it is, and you see them, and sometimes the connotation is that they're just here to have a building fund, and you've been given this building fund for 10 years and never didn't even change a doorknob in the church yet. So it's always something that you have to realize, that we have to keep this information ever in front of us, by not just by the actual prospect or the aspect of it, but the actual doing of the information that we have itself, the application of it. Archetypes. The ritual advances the perspective that God is both present and active. The infinite algorithms that govern the universe are made by a deity despite man's limited circumstance to digest its scope. Once again, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. However, observe from time to time in the midst are plums by which we measure ourselves, draw inspiration, and take additional steps towards a Masonic East. The archetypical exemplars of Asar or Osiris, Buddha, Muhammad, Yeshua or Jesus, and Hiram Abiff himself speaks the potential transcendental development of one's soul and intellect. When we talk about the plum here, we talk about, in Amos, it talks about God putting the plum in front of us so he can actually measure himself. So when we have these exemplars in front of us, we know it's possible for us to live a better and more productive life. Our duty is to develop purposeful and unique faculties in ourselves and encourage those in others that the world's condition may improve by our labors. Indeed, we are to take good men and show them a path that could make them better. Now, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but until somebody actually see you doing it and walking the walk, then it's basically a moot point. Coming to the conclusion. In conclusion, the pursuit of perfection's irony lies in, despite its noble aspiration, perfection will never be achieved in this life. We all know that, I don't know about y'all, but I grew up on the East Coast, and we had Soul Train that came on at noon, from noon to 1, and then from 1 to 3, we had Kung Fu Theater. They always had like some type of Kung Fu movie. And the best part of the Kung Fu movies for me was not the beginning where the old master get beat up, or at the end when the new young, Kung Fu master beats up the villain. It was always a part of the actual mastery of the skill. He works on, the 36 chambers, 35 chambers, and develop his own 36 chambers. It's always about him actually producing the skill that needed to actually defeat the evil villain itself. So it was always something that I always looked at. So number one, which looking at application, something that you can actually use in your life. More light in this life cannot be revealed by intellect alone. A spiritual component is necessary for the fullness thereof to be realized. Like I said, you need the square and the compass, the square representing the physical and the compass representing the spiritual. The two of them combined actually make perfection. So in order for us to actually get to that particular point, you need both sides of the coin. Number two, it is vitally important to recognize, respect, and cherish the spiritual commonality in all things. We are definitely the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. So it doesn't matter what your race, creed, religion, whatever it is, we're still bound by brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God, giving us the ties that bind. And number three, peace and blessings may be actuated when one realizes the potential of doing so, as many dwelling spiritual archetypes have already illustrated. So it's not like it can't be done. It's been done time after time and time again. It is our job to actually look at the life that we live and live a more clean and perfect life, no matter what the obstacles are. So herein lies my conclusion, and I thank you for my time. I will stop the sharing here and pause for your questions, concerns, and suggestions.